Hey everybody, good to be here today. My name is Brent Moores. I'm sitting in for Mike Fairborn, who's out this week. He's going to be out next week, and I think one more after that even. But then he will be back. But for now, I'm happy to be here to join you for ThinkScript studies on Thinkorswim. And hey, it's a good session. Good. I think we get to talk about some interesting stuff in this session. And today we're actually going to talk about some fundamental stuff, which a lot of times we don't really do as much in this class, but I think it's important to hit up occasionally. So I appreciate you. I appreciate those of you in the chat. And if you're watching live record on a recording, that's great too. We love you just as much. That's great. I'm joined by Rachel Shell in the chat, helping me out. Appreciate Rachel. As you have questions, feel free to type those in, and we'll do our best to help you out. And just a reminder, you can follow Rachel or myself on X at Brentmore CS, at Rachel-CS for additional content throughout the week. So now before we get to the main topic at hand, let me just remind you the following. The information today is for general informational purposes only. It's not an individual recommendation or personalized investment advice. The paper money software application is provided for educational purposes only. It allows users to engage in simulated trading. We'll look at individual symbols today, individual stocks. We'll talk about maybe some pros and cons with some of those stocks, but none of those are recommendations. And just remember, all investing involves risk, including for some products more than your initial investment. Past performance of any security or strategy does not guarantee future results or success. And there you go. I think that's the main disclosures I want to hit here today. But we're going to kind of just see where we're at in the process, discuss how ThinkScripting can help us, and then maybe some possible modifications to the script as well. So let me go and bring up the Thinkorswim platform. And what I want to start you out with today is fundamental analysis. I know you guys are used to moving averages and trends, and the reality is most of the time that's what we're looking at. But whether you're a longer term investor, whether you're just curious about fundamental analysis, whether you're a trader who wants to, consider dabble in some fundamental analysis, I think it's important that we know some of these things. And furthermore, I want to show you some ThinkScript things that maybe will help, ease your mind about using ThinkScript to try and help you. Whether it's something where you get into the full in and can code it yourself, that applies to some of you in the chat, in fact, I know. Or maybe you're using AI to help you program some things. You can do that too. I'm not going to stop you. And however it is, or you just take scripts that we give, and any script I show you today, I will share. I'll share with you some of those. I'll share with you whatever script I share today. Okay. So when we're talking about fundamental analysis, we're not talking about what the chart is doing. We're not talking about the trend. I'm going to go to the Analyze tab here. I'm just going to stick with a company to start, at least, that everybody knows, Apple. And I'm going to scroll down. I'm on Analyze, and then I'm on Fundamentals right there. So let me go down here, and you can read all about Apple if you don't know. But this is really what I'm getting at. When we look at what fundamental investors look at Apple, we're going to look at some of these things. But I think we can benefit from ThinkScript here. But let's look at some of these first of all. Earnings. This is kind of the standard thing that a lot of fundamentals, if not most fundamental investors, look at. They'll look at earnings per share. And what we can do is we can look at the trend over the past 5 years on this chart, and we can see that it's going up or not. But we can see what the current earnings per share is. We can see what dividends are. We can see what the book value per share is. And on some of these, it's not necessarily there's just a number we're looking for. A lot of times we're looking for the trend on these. Free cash flow per share. Well, free cash flow is just after you subtract out capital expenditures, what's your cash flow on that? And generally what investors like to see is a positive number there on cash flow. Same thing with sales. We want to see sales are always going to be positive, but we'd like to see the trend going up on sales. Earnings may not always be positive, but we want to see earnings being positive there. I guess sales could be, you could have zero sales, of course, but there you go. What about return on equity? Well, sometimes people will set measures for return on equity. For example, they may say something like, I want my return on equity, and this is an extremely high return on equity there, but a lot of times people will say, hey, I want a return on equity of at least 20% or something like that. Okay? ROE, people will refer to it as that. Return on assets will be lower typically than your return on equity, but maybe even for return on assets, we're looking for something maybe 10% or more on that. And we can look at things like gross profit margin, operating profit margin, net profit margins. There's probably some level that you want them to be at. And part of it may just depend on the industry you look at. But net profit margins are going to be less than your gross profit margin. If you bring in revenue or sales on a company, okay, let's say this is going to be a super simplified financial statement here. If you bring in revenue and then you have a cost of goods sold, okay, cost of goods sold. You buy product, you're selling products, for example, widgets, the cost of the widget itself. And when you subtract out that, you come up with what we'd call your gross margin, okay? Your gross margin. And so we can calculate that as a percent, and that's going to be your gross profit margin. Then we do like operating costs, okay? And that may be like operating costs. And that may be things like, I got to pay employees actually to do the manufacturing stuff. It's not just the cost of the product itself, but they're going to do some operation on there. There's operating costs involved. And that's where your operating margins come. So they're going to be a little lower than the gross margin because there's more expenses in there. So those are going to be operating margins. And then you have kind of everything else, and you have taxes and whatnot. And at the very bottom line is your net margin. And that's going to be the least of all these here. But even at that, you may say, I want a net margin there, and I want that net margin to be at least 5% or something like that. We'll talk about some of those percentages here in just a little bit. I'm not here to dictate exactly what the percentages you're going to use, but I want to kind of give you a sense on that. Debt ratios. Well, we could look for debt to be going down over time, but maybe there's some threshold on debt that people don't like. Maybe they don't want debt above 50% or 60% or something like that. Quick ratios and current ratios, same thing. It's just showing a current ratio is just how much your current assets are in relationship to your current liabilities. That is, so, that's kind of a measure that people use to determine how well you can take care of pay for your short-term obligations. And a quick ratio is similar, except we're going to subtract out the inventory there from that ratio. But we can go to this page if we want to, but there's a script that can also help us with that. So here's the script, and I'm going to show you it and I'm going to explain it to you. So let me go to my scripts, and this is just a fundamental labels script. Fundamental labels. Let's pull that up, apply this, and I'll share this script with you in a little bit. But what this does is it gives you some key metrics that you may want on the bottom of the chart, okay? Now, not only does it give you the number, but it can code these red or green, depending on how you want them coded. Like, for example, let's say you have a PE ratio and you say, hey, if my PE ratio is above 30, that's kind of not what I want, therefore I want to code it red or something like that. Well, you can do that. You can do that for any of these. And for the most part, I'm going to show you how to change the numbers on there if you want. And maybe you look and it can give you kind of a heads up of, oh my goodness, this current ratio is a little bit lower than I want here on Apple. Apple, my current ratio is 0.87. Some traders would consider that kind of a red flag, if you will, on that. And so maybe something to consider further there. Okay. Now, so let me first share with you the script, and then let me do that first. I'm going to share, and this is going to be fundamental labels, we'll call that. I'm going to share that script, and hold on, I just lost my cursor. Okay. One quick sec. Why that? Let me try this again. Okay, actually, let me go back to where I was and do it this way again. I don't know why that didn't. My cursor disappeared on me there for a sec, and I wasn't able to. Let's try this again. Fundamental labels. Okay, fundamental label, we'll call that. Share. There we go. Okay. And I'm putting that in the chat. Okay. Now, just a reminder, any of these scripts are not guaranteed for timing or accuracy. Okay. That's the first thing I got to say. Secondly, if you are watching on a recording and you don't get the chat, I'm going to put that right there in the scratch pad. You can pause this and you can copy this. I'll read it off to you, so if you have a hard time seeing, but just realize it is case sensitive. So, exclamation point, M as in Mary, Z, 1, F as in Frank, G, X, R, J. Okay? But just make sure you capitalize, it is case sensitive there. All you need is everything from the exclamation point on. Okay. Now, what do you do when you get that script? You go up to the gear, you click on open shared item, you paste it in there, click on preview. It'll probably give you a chance to name it if you want to change a name on it or something like that. Do it something descriptive, and then you can import that. And then it will just show up as one of your other studies. And then when you go to different companies, let's go to S&P 500 here, it's going to pull up. And it's going to give you some of these, okay? And you can see, maybe your debt to capital is a little higher on this one here. Let's look at a couple others. Let's look at PepsiCo, okay? PepsiCo, PE ratio 27. We'll have to see where I put the cutoff on that. And of course, you can tweak this. Dividend yield 3.7%. Payout ratio. What's a payout ratio? Payout ratio is how much of the dividend, how much of the earnings are being paid out in the form of dividend. Basically, in terms of Pepsi's current earnings, all of it's being paid out in terms of a dividend. That's a lot high for a lot of people. And so I marked that red there. Okay. So there's that. So you can go through and it can flag different things for you if you want, different areas of concern there. So let's go and just look at the script here and how, if you wanted to, you can modify the script. Okay. If you don't like, I just put in some preliminary ranges here, but these ranges are by no means buy or sell. There are no recommendations here. And it is a whole, when you're evaluating a stock, I don't care whether you're doing technical analysis or fundamental analysis, you got to look at the whole picture. Any one piece of data isn't going to tell you the whole story here. But let's do this. Let's go here. Let's look at the script for a sec. And we're not going to go through all the script, but let me just point out some things. If you don't like the colors, you can change the colors. Easy enough. I have color red and color dark green. Maybe you don't like the dark green. Maybe you just want green. Just go in the script. You can modify it, take out the dark underscore, and it'll turn into a brighter green there for you. In fact, I'll show you there. Let me go to one that's, I think, one sec. Let me just refresh myself. Okay. Let me get out of this, one sec. Like book value. Okay, so let's go to book value here. Let's say we want it. Let me just kind of show you how to change that. If I want to go to book value, I can scroll down until I find book value. Here's book value right down there. And notice it says color it dark green. If I want to make this will give you an idea of the different color you can do. I just take out the dark green and I apply that, click on OK. Okay, that's what the brighter green looks like. Now, I have no way to automatically change everything at once, but if you wanted to go through and you like that brighter green better, you can do that, okay? For consistency purposes, I am not going to do that. I'm going to actually go back and make this dark green again here. And so it's just DARK underscore green. Okay, and then we can apply that and we're back to the original color there. So don't be afraid to change the colors. That's an easy one to change. But more importantly, probably, is being able to change the parameters here. Let's start with the kind of a basic one. I'll start at the top with PE ratios. Okay, so you can see the area with the PE right there, and we're not going to change much of the script here. If you start to tinker with the script too much, unless you really know what you're doing, you can mess it up. But what I'm going to say is this. If you want to change the values, notice, let's read the code. If the PE, let me get my little highlighter tool here. If the PE is greater than or equal to 25, then color it red. Okay, so if I wanted to change that to maybe above 30, I would just change this little area right there, 25 to 30. Okay, let's continue to read this one, because this one's actually a little bit more complex than some of them, because this has 3 values. This has a PE ratio too high as being colored red. Also, we have if the PE ratio is less than 5, we're coloring it red. Why? Well, with PE ratios, I think for a lot of people, in terms of valuation, it may make sense if it's very expensive, why it may be colored red. Why would a low PE ratio be colored red, though? Well, sometimes if things become too cheap, it can be kind of a red flag. Let's say I'm offering you, well, let me give you a real life example. I was offered on, I think it was a social media, Facebook Marketplace or something, to buy it was a trailer for just this killer deal, would have been a killer deal, but it was an immediate red flag that there's something wrong. Nobody would normally sell this trailer for this particular price. It was just too good to be true. So if the PE ratio is very low, it could be a sign that there's some underlying problems with the company that people aren't willing to pay much money for it. Okay, so on this script here, what we're showing is if the PE is greater than 25, it's red. If it's less than 5, it's red. If it's greater than 5, but of course less than the 25, then we're giving it the dark green color there. But you can tweak that. In fact, just to show you, I'm going to tweak it right here while we're here. I'm going to say if the PE is greater than 30. I'm going to change that to 30, and then I can apply it, click on OK, and now my code has been changed, and my PE ratio, I think, so that would have been red before. It's now showing as green because of because I changed the parameter. Okay, I changed the parameter. You can do that for any of these. Let me show you some of the others because there are a bunch of them, and some of them look a little bit different. This may be one of the only ones where I have this 3-tier good or bad, good, bad scenario here. Let's look at dividend yield. Now, dividend yield, I don't think I have it colored at all. There is, I think, no matter what, if it, by the way, in fact, let me just show you this. Let's find a company that doesn't pay a dividend. Actually, there. So this company does not pay a dividend. Dividend yield doesn't even show. Okay. So if you're wondering, well, I don't see a dividend yield, it's because it doesn't pay a dividend. All right. But when we go back, we'll go to AIG. It doesn't matter what the yield is. I think it's always shows. Actually, I think if it goes too high, well, let's take a look. If it goes too high, I may flag it here. So let's go back to our symbol here, and let's just kind of read it. Where's dividend yield? Here's dividend yield. Okay. Add label. If dividend yield is greater than 8, right there, dividend yield is greater than 8, that's a red flag. Now, some of you may be going, why would that be bad? I want a huge dividend. Well, again, if a company is paying a very high yield, that can be some signs of of trouble in a company. Okay, that could be a little bit of a red flag. One way to think about this is this. Let's say you had two kind of comparable companies, and one was paying a really high dividend and the other one wasn't. Everybody would, if you felt the risk was the same on the two companies, everybody would just go out and buy the one with the higher yield. But of course, that would then drive up the price, which would drive down the yield. So this would be, you can kind of consider this almost as a risk, a measure of risk in a sense, if it gets really high. So again, let's change that and just say, well, maybe 8's maybe a little bit high there. Let's say if we go above 6, that's a little thin. Then we're going to do it. Now, this doesn't have the 3-tier approach. This is just saying if the dividend yield is greater than 6, we're going to color it red. Otherwise, that's what the else is. Otherwise, we're going to color it green. Okay. And if it doesn't have any yield, in other words, it doesn't pay any dividend, it just doesn't show. Same thing with the payout ratio, which I mentioned earlier. I think, did I mention payout ratio? Payout ratio is 70 here. That's where the cutoff is between red and green. The stock we were looking at earlier, PepsiCo, I think, had a payout ratio of about 100. Well, if a company is paying out more than 70% of its earnings in the form of a dividend, that could be kind of a red flag for people. Feel free to change that. Again, don't change it. You don't need to change anything other than just the number right here. Let's look at a couple others. Return on assets. Okay. If return on assets is less than 4, color it red. Otherwise, it's green. So this is just a simple, it's either red or green. ROE. Okay. Well, this return on equity greater than or equal to 15 gets dark green color. Well, maybe that's a little bit low. Let's bump that up to, I don't know, 18. Okay. And then if it's greater than 6, but less than 18, it's going to be green. So actually, this is totally unnecessary here, but you could say, well, if that ROE is so high, which could indicate like a very leveraged company, let's say our our ROE is above 70 or something like that, then we could color that red. Okay, so I'm going to do, oopsie, we're going to do red. Let me just change that, RED. Okay. Now, if you're typing, if there's something wrong, it will kind of color and say, something's wrong here with this script. Let me do red, and then I can apply, and then I have that 3-tier code there on that. Okay. So there you go. So let's continue here, and I'm going to look at the, we've got current ratio I mentioned, quick ratio I mentioned, and I don't want to go through all of these right now because now that you know how to change these, you can. But you can go down the list here as well. And let me just mention one other thing, and that is debt. A lot of people will look at debt of a company. One shortcoming, if you will, of the script is I have no way of looking at the trend over the last 5 years, say, and trying to find what the trend is on the debt. That would be ideal. But we can look and say, just an absolute number, 50 or whatever on that. Okay, so let me click on OK here. Those are probably the main things you're going to want to add. Now, are there other fundamental labels you can add? I felt were the most relevant ones. To be honest, if you look at on, this is just like tells you the code on what's available on ThinkScript. If you go to stock fundamentals, you can see there are some other things like I don't have tax rate in there. I didn't put the tax rate in there because it wasn't totally relevant to me, but you could add that in there. There's a few others, but I have quite a few others. And by the way, I was not the original creator of this script. So let me just mention, I don't want to steal credit for doing the original scripting on this. It was not me. I don't recall off the top who did this script originally. But there you go. Okay. So let's take a look at some companies and evaluate the fundamentals based on this. And let me answer some questions too that we may have. But let me just go. I want to look at a few companies that have been in the news. Here's CrowdStrike. And we actually have a fair amount of red. I mean, a lot of these ratios aren't super strict in terms of getting a green, but let's just see what we got. P ratio is showing negative. That would explain it. And the that would mean that our earnings are negative on this. So that's, if that's a concern, then that flags it. ROA, our return on assets is negative. Return on equity is negative. That would be if we have a negative return or a loss. Our profit margin, all these are just showing, or there's our EPS showing negative. So that's just kind of a red flag. Now, does that mean this stock is doomed to failure? It does not mean that. There are companies that can go, that can be in a losing money situation for a while, yet they're priced on their potential for the future. But if you just want a quick heads up, I think that's probably a decent way to look at that. Let's look at another company here and just kind of pick out, what do we got here? P/E ratio 32. So that's slightly high according to the parameters that I have set that you can certainly change. Those are not recommendations. Your dividend yield is paying about 3%. Payout ratio, again, is fairly high on this one. That would be a red flag for a lot of people. Now, you can find that payout ratio on that fundamentals page, but it's a lot easier just here. And if you want, what you can do is if this isn't something you want to look at every stock, you can always go and you can quick link it up here if you want. So the way you do that is you go to your chart settings, you go to My Tools, you can do it on each chart, click on OK. Once that's there, you can click on the gear and you can say, oh, I want to add, hold on one sec, it's not going to show on my screen resolution right now. I got to bring it over to another screen, but I'm going to add another button, and that button it gives me a choice what to add, and I'm going to add a study, and I'm going to go to sorry, my resolution right now is not letting me do that. Let me just see if I can get that. That's not going to let me do it. Okay, well, I don't want to spend too much time doing that. Just try one more. One more here real quick and see if there's any way I can get that to show without changing my whole. I'm not going to be able to do that right now. So sorry, I wanted to show you how to do that. But you can quick link it just like I have these other things quick linked right up here at the top. You click on gear, it'll pull up. I got to go to my user defined studies, which are off the bottom, coming off the bottom of the screen, and I can't show you that right now. But you can click that right there, and then you can do it. And that way you can just add it, just like any other chart, and put that on. I don't have that quick linked right now, but come to think of it, I'm going to actually add that after we're done here today. So let me go and let me bring my study back up here, and then we'll just look at a few companies here. I'm going to bring my fundamental labels up, apply, there we go. And let's just look at another company, okay, UPS. Here's UPS, and you can see debt to capital I have at 61%. Now, what this does is it doesn't necessarily tell me the company's no good. We may also add in a technical analysis on top of that. We're below our 50-day moving average. For the most part, we've been trending down a little bit more sideways lately. But that can tell me, look at that debt to capital. What's that number doing? And let me click on analyze fundamentals. Wiley in the chat said, I think that 7's the most you have. That's how it used to be. You can actually have more now, okay? And the problem I ran into, by the way, on adding that is this. When I'm presenting, I expand my Thinkorswim on this monitor I have to make it easier for all of you to see. It's actually a little bit, but the problem with that is it runs some stuff off the screen. Usually isn't a problem, but in that case, it is. So, but let's look at that debt here. And so we're going to long-term debt to capital. That flagged a little bit high. It's actually lower than it used to be. So maybe that wouldn't be such a terrible thing there in this case. Let's go and look at some other companies here and possibly find one that looks better for a longer term trade. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to narrow our scope down to the S&P 100. Okay, we're going to look at some bigger companies, and I'm going to do this, and we're also going to factor in some technical analysis here. I want something that is mostly trending up is going to be my take on this. Hey, we got Caterpillar. I don't see any red flags here on this data. It doesn't mean it's everything, but we have a trend that's going up on Caterpillar. We have a P ratio, 27, which isn't maybe a super red flag. seems okay. It's not paying a massive dividend. So if I'm looking to be a dividend investor, that may not be enough. And payout ratio seems fine. That's no problem. ROE, ROA, and ROE aren't red flagged. Free cash flow's positive. We're making money. We have positive earnings. And some of these others like book value I've added and sales per share, they're just going to show green if it's positive. Well, most companies are going to be, they're just going to show green. So therefore, you're going to want to look at the trend on that. And long-term debt to capital, not so bad. But this is a first step. It's not a last step, is my point here. Our trend is going up. So let's double check the fundamentals, and then we'll place a longer term trade based on Caterpillar, based on this data here. Okay, so let's look at those fundamentals with a little bit more of a fine eye here than we were before. Remember, what we want to see on earnings is we want to see it trending up. It's been going up. Okay, book value, ideally book values trending up. It is going up. In general, I'm looking more at the last couple years, last like 3 years or so, rather than 2020, 2021. A lot of that was affected by COVID, right? So sometimes that doesn't make free cash flow. I'd like that to generally be going up. And in general, it has. Sales generally going up. That's what we like to see. ROE, ROA generally going up. There's no perfect companies out there, but we just want to avoid the red flags. You'd like to see your margins going up. And when you scroll down on here, capital, this is one where we don't want it to be going up, right? Debt to capital, ideally it'd be going down or staying sideways. And basically it's staying more or less sideways here over the past few years. These are all both within kind of normal parameters. We mentioned the PE ratio. You can see where it is compared to the 5-year average. And so, that shows it's not totally out of whack compared to where it's been in the past. And then there's your yield. So let's say we went through this and we decided, hey, fundamentally we like it. Technically we like it. I want to buy some shares. Well, make sure you look, it's a $540 company. If I just blindly bought 100 shares, that'd be $54,000. That's probably more than I'd want. So in this case, you got to figure out how much you're willing to invest in this. Maybe it's 10 shares. Okay. There's nothing wrong with buying 10 shares of a company. You can right click on it. You can buy it, or if you want to do a stop at the same time, you could buy custom with a stop. Let me just scrunch this down a little bit here. Come on. Is that okay? We'll do that. And we can say, well, look, I already actually have a trade on Caterpillar here, so you're seeing that there. But let's say I want my stop down closer to, below this bounce here, $450. Well, let's go back here. I can look at my stop. I can make my stop good till canceled. I could put it in at $450. That does not guarantee we're going to get out at $450, but that's the activation price, $450 or less. Once a stop order is activated, it turns into a market order. So ultimately, that is just not a guaranteed price on that. And then double check, make sure your quantity's right. I don't want 100 shares. Remember, we said how expensive that was. I only want 5 shares on this. Okay. And then what you can do is you can confirm and send, and then send that order there. Okay. All right. So let me just double check questions, summarize, and then we'll call it good here. Okay. So truth will always prevail. I do not have a script for that right now, although I have seen one, but it required, the script that I saw for that required some extra inputs there on that, that you had to manually enter there. Eric says, why not sell a put to get the, well, you can certainly sell a put if you want. There's pros and cons of that, right? You can sell a put to try and get shares at a lower price, but if the stock jumps up, I may never even buy the stock there. So I'm just dealing with stocks here today, but valid point, something to consider, no doubt on that. And Rachel, thank you for helping me with the chat. I think you got the questions answered in there. I appreciate that. Coming up at the top of the hour, we have selecting an option strategy. Okay, so I showed you the label today, the fundamental label. I showed you also how to manipulate the labels, both in terms of color and in terms of the parameters that you want to designate as red or green. I am not making any suggestions as to what you should designate as red or green, but I just have some in there right now. You're welcome to change those there. And there you go. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. And make sure you subscribe to that Trader Talks channel. And in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of the day. We'll see you same time next week. Bye-bye, everybody.